What's up, people? I am sweaty. I'm a sweaty mess right now. I am cooling off from a workout that I just did. I look like what I went through. I've been kind of struggling in my mental a little bit. Feeling unmotivated to do things, feeling discouraged in general, not in one specific area of my life, but in general. And I'm not even talking like faith and spirituality, I'm talking about humanity. This is not something that is new or foreign to me, something that I've dealt with for a while. It comes and it goes. I'm noticing that specific times of the month kind of bring this about. So I've been trying to like get through it on my own, just kind of figure it out on my own. I've been trying to be self-sufficient, and I'm having a eye-opener about that. You know, this whole living surrendered thing, I launched that shirt 2 years ago, and I'm still being tested in that area, which duh, living surrendered means it's a continual thing. But when I launched the shirt, I didn't actually think about the fact that it would be that weighty. So I don't know if it's that I'm not getting the lesson, so it's repeating itself, or if it's more so like this is just a continual thing that you have to learn how to maneuver through life while it's still very present. I hope I'm making sense. Like, it makes sense in my head, but I hope it's making sense coming out of my mouth. You know, the idea of deliverance is that, you know, you deal with something for X amount of time, you get delivered, and then you're never going to deal with it again. But I don't think that's what it is. I'm just talking. But I think that deliverance is about revelation of truth. So you're delivered from lust because you get revelation about the truth behind lust. You get the revelation first, but then I feel like after you get the revelation and after you're delivered, it's a process of continual like gathering tools. I hope I'm making sense. And so that's in regards to lust, but what about in regards to insecurity? What about in regards to discouragement, or what's the imposter syndrome? Like, what about those things? Is it that you never ever face it again? Or is it that you now have tools to properly navigate it where it no longer has you bound, but instead when you face it, when you encounter it, when a life situation comes up that could easily lead you back into that, you now have tools to overcome it, which you didn't have tools to overcome it before. So I did a journal entry a while back, last week actually. We had Bible study and we talked about making sure that your foundation is Christ, not just singing the song, but ensuring that the foundation you're building your life on is the only solid and secure foundation. Not alcohol, not entertainment, not people. And Jeremiah said this last week. He said not even self-sufficiency. And when he said it, it was like a light bulb went off for me, because I hadn't even considered the fact that I was dealing with self-sufficiency at all. That sounds so crazy to me now. Like, how did it not cross your mind? How did you not think of that? But I really did not realize that that's where I was, like, that's what I was dealing with. So the scripture, his grace is sufficient. You know, Lord have mercy, Paul asking God to remove the thorn in his flesh, and God, you know, 3 times he asked, but the only thing that God said was, my grace is sufficient for you. But we take that and we're like, yeah, God's grace is sufficient, but right before that, he said he was given a thorn in his flesh so that he would not exalt himself. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 7. Therefore, so that I would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me, so that I would not exalt myself. He said it twice, so that I would not exalt myself. And when we look at that, that is pride, right? So then verse 8, concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. So I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and in difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I did my Bible study. I read some commentaries about this particular passage. Tony Evans described a thorn as something or someone that painfully nags or irritates one's humanity on a continual basis. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, like this feeling I have is familiar. Like I've dealt with this before. I couldn't put a name to it though. Like I was just like, yeah, I just don't feel good. I don't feel encouraged. I don't feel motivated. Like I'm being very pessimistic about life in general. And yeah, I wasn't able to put a word to it. So I was like, okay, well, let's just call it my little thorn. Paul's thorn was 1, painful. Thorns don't bring comfort. 2, God sourced. God allowed it with good purpose in mind. And 3, God wanted to keep Paul humble. And I was like, okay, so the whole, why would God want us to suffer? Blessings are chasing me down. Like those things that we say, I think we say them with the expectation that all of these things are good things. They're things that are going to feel good to us. But Paul had a thorn that tormented him that God allowed to keep him humble. Interesting. So I was like, okay, like I get it. Self-sufficiency, humble, humility, like I get it, God, but what are you saying? Like I get it, but I don't. And I was reminded that I prayed a prayer and I said, God, keep me humble so that you don't have to humble me. And at the time, it sounded like a good prayer to pray. At the time, my intentions were good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go through the pain of you having to humble me, like the pain and the humiliation of being humbled. I don't want to experience that. So Lord, just keep me humble. But I didn't realize that God keeping me humble just might look like a thorn that I'm begging God to take away. I'm begging God to help me with. Like it's just so painful. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Much like a lot of our, faith journeys and salvation journeys. Like, God, I know you got me, but this sucks. Like, please take it away. What I wrote here is, faith and prayer could not rid Paul of this thorn. God did this to keep him humble. Carefully consider what God may have sent your way to keep you humble. The commentaries that I read were saying that Paul omitted this, like the particulars of his thorn, so that we would have something to relate to. Blase skip whoop de whoop. Like I've seen a few commentaries that say that, or a few like blog posts that say that. But my situation has now led me to look at it from the standpoint of, what if, much like myself, he just called it a thorn because he did not have words to really illustrate what exactly it was. He could not put it into words. He just knew that it was vexing him so bad. He didn't want to call it discouragement. He didn't want to call it fear. He didn't want to call it anxiety. He didn't want to call it depression. Like, what if all the words that came to mind didn't quite illustrate what he was dealing with for real? So he said the only thing that he could think of, which was a thorn. You ever been pricked by a thorn? It is irritating. He asked God to remove the thorn, to take it away, but he didn't just ask, like he begged God. It says he asked him 3 times. He begged God to take it away, and yet his prayer went unanswered. How often do we actually consider prayers unanswered and suffering to be God's grace and love toward us? How can we see these things as God's grace? Paul begged God to take it away because it was hurting him so bad. It was bothering him so bad. And God, with the audacity of the Lord, said, my grace is sufficient. You're telling me that this is grace? This thing hurts and you're telling me this is grace. You didn't answer my prayer and you're telling me that that's your grace? How? It wasn't the answer that Paul wanted, but it was the answer that he needed. We think that it would be enough if he just answered our prayer and did it our way, but he's saying his way is enough. What he deems to be for our good is enough. Paul considered it to be unbearable and he asked God to take it away, but God responded that it was just enough for Paul to handle, although it made him weak. Because Paul was powerless in this manner, meaning he couldn't remove it, he couldn't forget about it or neglect it, and he couldn't pray or faith his way out of it, nor could he fully understand it. So the weakness that I'm having here is that I can't fully understand what I'm feeling. I understand certain things about it, but I can't put it into words. I don't understand it. Because Paul was powerless in this manner, because I am powerless in this manner, Paul was moved to humble himself before the Lord, and so am I. And the Lord knew that Paul needed humility. If God were to remove this from me, it would make me self-sufficient. I probably would not pray. I probably would not read my word. I probably would not seek his face, because why would I need to? You know what I'm saying? And that is the grace of God to say that, girl, I could see you going down this road, honey, and you don't really want that. So let me humble you real quick. By my grace, let me allow this thorn to keep you humble. Yes, you asked for it, but also, even if I didn't ask for it, God would still see fit. I'm tempted to say, I don't deserve this. I'm tempted to say this isn't fair. I'm resting in his grace. I'm resting in knowing that God knows what I need even when I don't. So, my in living virtue moment, I don't allow myself to be weak. I just don't. But I never focused on the fact that it was self-sufficiency. I've never given that thought. I never put those words to it for real. I don't know, somewhere I told myself that I can't be weak. I can't show weakness. I just can't. And I can see where God is like, I need to deal with that. We never deal with that. We've dealt with some hard things over the last couple of years, Arnesia. Now we need to deal with that. As uncomfortable as it may be for you.